The relative world is not what it appears to be. And so it's because it's not what it appears to be, you can't say it doesn't exist at all, but it doesn't exist the way that you experience it. And you begin to notice this by bringing attention to it. But you can't bring attention to it if you're only thinking about it and living in your concepts about it. So it's such a basic thing to put your attention on anything and notice that your attention gets pulled away to thinking about it or something else rather than just being with it. So that's the most basic thing. The other thing about the breath is that it has all these side effects. If you pay attention to the breath, then the breath evens out. If the breath evens out, you automatically become calmer. So it has that, dual thing, which isn't true if you had a twig there. Although it would be to some degree. If you pay attention to a twig long enough, you'll find yourself relaxing also. But there's just that whole physiological aspect of the breathing and how as it calms down, you're able to focus more. So it just plays in all very nicely all together. But Ramana Maharshi recommended that people just follow their breath, pay attention to their breath, if they found that they couldn't do self-inquiry easily. So he said, then pay attention to the breathing and your ability to be with things as what he called concentration, what they usually call calm abiding or relaxed focus. He called it concentration, your ability to have more and more concentration, and then you can go back to do self-inquiry more easily. So he recommended following your breathing, which a lot of people don't know. But that was the one thing, first he always went for the top first, like talk directly about self-inquiry. But then if people couldn't relate to it or couldn't follow him or whatever, then he would say, um, bhakti is a way to produce concentration by, bring your attention to an image of God or something like that, or just follow your breath. Also create the concentration, the ability to focus, relaxedly focus. The word concentration in English is a little, because of, I don't know, I always think it's tense, and that's not what he meant. It's kind of just the ability to rest your attention on an object without being distracted. The without being distracted thing, though, I think in terms of instruction, that's not helpful. Just putting your attention on an object, that's the helpful part. Because if you start to think, oh, I'm failing at this if I'm becoming distracted, that interferes with the actual capacity to place attention on the object. You just bring it right back and you do that. If you do that 10 times, that's really good. 50 times, 100 times, that's great. Doesn't matter how many times you lose track. It's how many times you've noticed. That's important. Anything else, Lee?
No, thank you. That's great. I'll work on it.
If you like. It's certainly simple enough. Yeah, if all we do is keep paying attention to our breathing all the time, then all pointing out instructions become easy to follow. And then if you want to go one step further, it's as you're paying attention to the breathing, you allow yourself, or you allow attention to expand and notice what is it that's paying attention to the breathing, or what's breathing.
Just to jump on that for a moment,
Yes.
I think we all know that the breathing is one of those autonomic body systems that we also have mental control over, or physiological control over. That the I can stop my breath. I can breathe hard if I want to. I can manipulate it in many ways. And yet there's no I here.
There's no
So
what? No I?
there's no I here. There's um, that understanding, that fact, if I can say that, runs up against the wall uh, of non-duality, where there's no one to make the breath go in and out. There's no one to manipulate. It's the junction of horizontal and vertical. I'm not quite sure what I'm getting at here.
Yeah. What are you getting at? This is good. Good. Keep going. Where are you going though? Good though.
Uh, okay, so um, I can watch my breath,
Well, there's no I though.
but there's no I.
Right. So what does it mean you can watch your breath?
Right. So I'm aware of awareness. Awareness is aware that breath is happening.
So let me say this. Uh, the idea that there's no I is a pointer. There's no separate I, right? I is not permanent, but I exists as a thought. It's a function, just like memory. But memory doesn't exist separately. It's a process that arises and falls away in a larger way. The illusion is that the I has actual agency in an independent way. It's the independence that's the illusion. It's true that the sense of a permanent I is an illusion because it's not permanent, but it's certainly, there's an I thought and there's a feeling sense of I, and you can call that I, and that's all that anybody means by I, whether they're a cab driver from Brooklyn or they're Ramana Maharshi. It's only a sense of I. Nobody thinks that if you do an operation, you find an I, right? It's a mental thing. And it is a mental thing. It's a mental factor. Even in Advaita Vedanta, it's called ahamkara. It's the um, integrative factor, like it's the I thought or it's the claimer. claims everything. Like, I got up this morning, or I can, what you just said something, I can be
I
aware,
can watch my breath.
I can watch my breath, right? It's a thought of explaining things in an ownership way, right? So there's like thoughts that are like scattered, like, and that's kind of a mind we have, and then there's thoughts that feel more gathered, and then there's an I thought feeling that takes ownership of all of that. My thoughts were scattered, and my thoughts were more coherent. My. So feeling sense and a thought and a thinking that goes away when you're daydreaming or when you're driving or skiing or having sex or sleeping at night or all kinds of moments. Even normal stuff like walking from one room to another. Sometimes there's no I there at all. There's just walking. And then you get into the room and go, what was I here for? Oh, and then it comes back online. So it gets interrupted. It's very painful when it can't be interrupted. When people get into addictive behaviors to try to obliterate for a little while,
Mhm.
or take a lot of sleeping pills so they can go to sleep, because the mind is churning and it's a lot of ownership of the mind, habitual ownership of it. And all of that creates suffering, but it's not ultimately real, right? It's all kind of connected to other things, but it acts like it owns a life, like it owns a body. I'd say it's just thinking, just a certain thought and feeling. So got to be careful not to get like too dogmatic about not being an I, because then it becomes a trap too. Oh, I know there's no I, so why is this not working? Because you're experiencing an I. So there is an I for you there. Um, but look at what the nature of it is. What is that I? The nature, looking at the nature of the I is not just so that you can say to yourself, it doesn't exist. It's to see the nature of it. What is it that we mean? What to say it doesn't exist? What it doesn't exist. I mean, nobody, like I say, nobody thinks it exists as a thing. Like nobody expects that they'll have an operation and find an eye. Everybody knows it's the kind of thinking, but let's see the way that that thinking arises and what does it do and what is it? Um, yeah, unexamined is what most people, like I said, people driving a cab in Brooklyn. It's mostly unexamined. It's the only difference. If you examine it, you see that it's dependent. It's dependent. It's not, you know, that's the thing, because it's like we usually say things like the buck stops with me, and it doesn't. It's far back, further back. You know, the me is not continuous. It's not permanent. It's not up to the me whether the me is permanent or continuous, or even, whether the me shows up or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's proceed from here then. I just want to make that point. Because rather than saying, oh, there's no I, and then creating a false problem, there is an I. But what is it? It's not permanent. It's a feeling sense, right? It's a way of thinking. So if it's a feeling sense and a way of thinking, is there a problem that you wanted to look at? Like if the I is dependent, now let's look at the question.
Well, the comment related to the I having control of the breath.
Right.
And the
So
paradox of having
I means,
control of
all
the
right.
breath.
So if I say in the, like, again, that word that's for relative reality, it's like we can work with it. So I'll show you an example of it. So the I is you, right? We're talking about. Okay.
That's what I call this.
Notice I don't know what that means exactly, and you don't know exactly what it means, but I said it and you went, "Yup." That's what I mean. Relative reality means that it's kind of relatively you can work with it, right? So you are in control of your breath to some degree, aren't you?
Yes.
But can you stop your breath for 15 minutes?
No.
No.
I can stop it for 10 seconds.
Right.
Is that good
And
enough?
well, can you always stop it for 10 seconds? What about when you have a bad cold?
I could probably stop it for 10, but
Can you imagine that there's
not 30,
can you imagine that you might have a
not
disease
two
where it's
minutes.
not can you imagine you can have a disease where it's not possible for you to hold your breath very much? That you'd start coughing uncontrollably,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not, it's dependent. The capacity, the appearance of being in control is dependent on factors that aren't the I, the body, whether you're underwater,
Right.
all kinds of things, whether there's gas in the atmosphere all of a sudden that you didn't know about, and the whole room fills up with gas, and now you can't breathe, um, can't hold your breath, you're unconscious, all kinds of stuff. The I sense is, the the appearance of agency is something that's you could another way of speaking that's kind of more poetic is that it's a gift. It's on loan. Your capacity. I mean, we see again, we, whoever that is, or I, or you, um, we usually when we're young, we have a sense that we have lots of agency, and we know theoretically that eventually we'll have less agency, but we don't get it until we get older or we have diseases. We don't really recognize the limits of our agency. I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to run up and down stairs with no problem. I can't seem to do it as well. Well, what is I? If I is living in the body somewhere, a thought, it's not really the I. What we're talking, see, that's the thing. Ahamkara, the I thought, is just a claimer. So it notices that the body can no longer breathe as well, and it says I can no longer breathe as well,
Mhm.
right? So the I is it's a thought about whatever's going on. It's dependent on everything. And even the I thought itself, the noticing is dependent on alertness. It's very different when it's intoxicated than when it's not intoxicated, or when it's on anesthesia, too much anesthesia, or too much pain medication, whatever. It will be different. But in any case, it's all dependent. Agency is dependent too. The so so we take away all the extraneous things. We just look at the breath itself, what we call healthy. In other words, an 18-year-old body paying attention to the breathing. If you look closely, you see that again, there's a certain bandwidth where it appears that there's agency, but you go beyond that bandwidth and there's no agency. Whatever it is, okay, hold your breath for this amount of time. And with some training, you might be able to open up that bandwidth where the sense of agency is there. But all of that is dependent on the body's health and all that other stuff, right? It's dependent on more than the I sense. Like it's almost like the I sense is just taking credit for the set of limits called the body and what it's doing when it's not doing. So I can hold my breath for 15 seconds. What does it mean? It means the body can hold its breath for this long. So it gets a little tricky, like, but there's a sense of will involved. Okay. It's this whole illusion of independence for everything. It's like a convenient thing. We leave out convenient things because they seem like, oh yeah, yeah, I know, but so what? Let's not pay attention to that. Like like will, right? The will to hold your breath. That doesn't come out of nowhere either. You read in a book or something, it's good to hold your breath. That's why you did it. So you're dependent on the book, or you heard it's a good idea. Or, strange thing, a thought comes to you. I wonder what it would be like for me to hold my breath. Well, the I thought sitting there minding its own business, and an exterior, another thing called a thought comes in and goes, what would be like if I held my breath for 15 seconds? The I thought didn't, it's just there. And then all of a sudden, this other thought comes. I thought that thought. What does that even mean? Look carefully, see? You look carefully. It doesn't mean anything. It means the I was there and the thought came and it went, oh, that's me again. I did that. And that's what the Ahamkara, that's what the I thought, the claimer does. It just, whatever's, it just, oh, that's me. Does it with the body, it does it with pain, it does it with pleasure. I really felt good and I did that and I thought that and it's just claiming whatever's coming through, but it's all dependent on the stuff that comes through. Now, who put that thought on the conveyor belt that when it came here and oh, I got it. Who did that? Delivered that package back there? I have no idea. This, the thought makers, the fairies or the elves who make the thoughts back there and put them on the belt, and then it comes to me. Oh, I have no idea. So it's all of that, all of the I don't know beyond my awareness that I'm embedded in. That's what karma means. That's what reincarnation means. That's what all of that. It's like, I'm not saying it's not true. It's just that it isn't anything you can check on. And so it's a secondary level of belief that's convenient. I mean, Ramana talked this way. I mean, he said, all of the creation stories and all of that, what is it all for? It's just to calm you down and say, yes, it's beyond you. Something made the universe. It's bigger than our capacity to know, but it's causes and conditions that are given to us. And it came from some past life, that's a nice theory, but whatever it is, you get it. You get this thought that comes in, you get these circumstances that you're embedded in. Is it a past life? Maybe, maybe not. I have no idea, but it's beyond me. And I get these things and I have to deal with them. And the I maker, or the ego, or the ahamkara, goes, oh, yeah, I did that and I did this, and it kind of does that with stuff. So, yeah. Breathing is an interesting thing in that way because it's really kind of, you can see that it's one of those things, where it it seems like you have control. You again means the I claimer, but it's not, it's really agency when you really look at it, it's kind of an illusion. I mean, free will is an illusion. Totally. Absolutely, 100% an illusion. Because of this dependence. Because of dependence. Because the very thing that can have a will is dependent on things outside of it. It doesn't choose what the next thought will be. It can't. It comes from somewhere else. And if you're a scientist, you can go, well, he ate this in the morning. I mean, there's all kinds of factors. You can line them up. You don't have to, you don't have to know that part of it. But it's interesting now. I mean, it's now, it, funnily, I mean, it's really funny. There's scientific people out there now, neurobiologists and neurologists and all these, and they're going around saying there's no free will, as if this is like never been seen before. But they're going like, wow, how how could you know? And they have all these studies like that judges that if you go before a judge after he's had his lunch, your percentages go way up that you're let off with an easy sentence. And if it's before lunch and the blood sugar isn't there, then you're in trouble. You're going to get the harshest penalty possible. And they interview the judges and they always give some legal reasons, but it's like really consistent. And there's so many things like that where it's like obviously things beyond your awareness that's affecting, and you say, well, there it is. And then there's just common sense, like education. Well, oh, well, I educated myself. Oh, it depends who you were born into. It depends who your parents were. It depends the influences around you. It depends what your financial situation was. You can always find, oh, well, but this person did that and this and this. Yeah, but they had this other thing. Oh, yeah. Well, he went to prison and yeah, but when he was in prison, he read that book. Oh, yeah. And he met that guy. Yeah. Oh, there's always something. That's because we aren't separate. And there's no we in us that's separate. There's no I in us that's separate. So yeah.
You're describing the the study of reality, the study of relative reality, or as I think you've said, the nature of, or
Nature of
the
it.
context of um, relative reality, which is mind-based, basically, because we're living in the world of our making.
Well, yeah, technically, just for the record, most of the time when I say the context, I'm speaking about what relative reality is arising in, which isn't relative reality, right? So when I say context, but it's true though, it's all context, but the context of it all is simply awareness of all of this. And same thing with nature of, it's like the nature of mind. You can see the nature of mind as the functioning of mind, or you could see that the nature of mind transcends what we usually call mind. It's beyond mind, the nature of mind. And that in the Dzogchen teachings, that's what Rigpa is called, the nature of mind, which is a different, it's a different, I like that language. It's kind of, it puts the emphasis in a different place. Rather than saying the transcendence of mind, like, oh, it has nothing to do with mind, it's saying the nature of the stuff is it's made out of intrinsic awareness. Even mind is made out of nothing but intrinsic awareness, but it's in certain configurations so that it appears to be something that exists independently, but it doesn't.
Just to clarify, if is the context of mind also intrinsic awareness?
Yeah, that's usually how I use
So
it.
in that sense, nature and context of this mean the same thing.
Um, they're two different fingers pointing in the same direction.
Okay.
But the language is like a little different because of the jumping off points, right? It's like you're jumping off from this side of the mountain, you're jumping off from that side of the mountain, but where you're heading for is the same space. So the language is a little different because it's a little grassy on this side and it's rock over here. Like, just metaphorically speaking, they're different. They're um, yeah, but it's pointing at the same moon, pointing at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Transcendence. In
So,
one context, like the word context for me is a spatial word. So objects arise in the context. That's kind of how I think of it. In the other context is mind, the nature of mind and thought. And the nature of mind is consciousness itself. And the space in which everything is arising is consciousness itself.
which is
Whatever.
intrinsic awareness.
Right. Words, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If I'm uh, working with my breath in any of these senses, um, and the goal, if there's a goal, it's to develop discrimination, to watch, to be aware when my focus shifts, when something jumps up, when my peace is broken. So I'm being with my breath, something comes along. And if I'm aware there's something along, I'm still with my breath. If
Right.
I'm aware that something's coming along and I get caught in it, I'm no longer with my breath.
Right. And then you immediately bring your attention
Um,
back to the breath as soon as you notice.
as soon as I notice, right? I can't do it any earlier than that, but
Right. So there's no point at which you need to fail.
right.
None. You may fail because you'll have failing thoughts like, oh, I messed up. That's the only failure. It's a sense of, oh, I messed up. But you don't
Mhm.
even have to have that. You could just, okay, go. In other words, if you're thinking, there's nobody there to go, oh, I'm thinking. You're thinking. And then you notice, ah, I noticed. And it's like, ah, Bodhi, like, oh, awareness, yay. And then attention to breathing. See? It's a no lose. Just that. The breathing meditation is the most basic meditation in the most early schools of Buddhism, right? In Theravadan Buddhism, it's calm abiding, it's samatha meditation, early suttas. And there's the whole Zen school, all about paying attention to the breathing, sitting. There are Mahamudra, in other words, the highest form of non-dual teaching that uses the breath, that just uses the breath. There are Mahamudra teachings that use visualizations and deity practice and all of that, but there are also highest Mahamudra teachings that simply use following the breath. But they bring in the larger context as you're following the breath. There's a different way in which you're following the breath because there's a different way of yourself that's aware of the body sitting following its breath. Because the if you're no longer trying to follow your breath, following your breath is happening. Well, what's aware of all of that? Being the context of all of it as you're following your breath. Now it's not just a beginner's practice. That's the Buddha following his breath. See, the Buddha every day sat down to meditate with all the other disciples. Every day, sat down, meditated too. But why? He woke up a long time ago. Well, he taught it. He sat down with them and he did it with them, meditated with them. It's a very different form of following your breath when you're Buddha.
Mhm.
In some ways, it's not any different, but in other ways, it's just the sense of the awareness of all of it includes following the breath. You're finding the presence of intrinsic awareness in the breath. Not you, but there's a finding of intrinsic awareness in the breath.
Mhm.
Or maybe
Mhm.
you. however you want to say it. Finding intrinsic awareness in the presence of the breath. It's a different thing. Like a Dzogchen version.
And then the nature of mind, the nature of the mind is irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the actual contemplation of the nature of mind always makes the nature of mind irrelevant.
Mm.
This is the transcendence of concepts, always makes the concept irrelevant. Relevant, that's what a skillful means is, right? It's just a means to an end. It's just a vehicle. It's, just the very thought,
Yeah.
nature of mind is ultimately just a vehicle. It's just an instruction. All of the Buddhas.
Thank you for that. That's
Oh, yeah. Very good.
it's a great cap. It's a great great way to. It's the icing on the cake.
It is. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. Perfect. I was just going to say that all of the Buddhist teachings are a skillful means to address distracted attention, and that's basically it. All kinds of distracted attention. We're distracted 1,000,001 ways. Or 108,000 ways is, I think, the traditional way of saying it.
Right. We keep inventing more.
Right. Mm. Mm. Thank you, Lee. Anything else? Please feel free if
No,
there is. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.